Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, paragraph 16. Yet this formalism maintains that such monotony and abstract universality are the absolute, and we are assured that dissatisfaction with it indicates the inability to master the absolute standpoint and to keep hold of it. Time was when the bare possibility of imagining something differently was sufficient to refute an idea, and this bare possibility, this general thought, also had the entire positive value of an actual cognition. Nowadays, we see all value ascribed to the universal idea in this non-actual form, and the undoing of all distinct determinate entities, or rather the hurling of them all into the abyss of vacuity without further development or any justification, is allowed to pass muster as the speculative mode of treatment. Dealing with something from the perspective of the absolute consists merely in declaring that, although one has been speaking of it just now as something definite, yet in the absolute, the A equals A, there is nothing of the kind. For there, all is one. To pit this single insight that in the absolute everything is the same against the full body of articulated cognition, which at least seeks and demands such fulfillment, to palm off its absolute as the night in which, as the saying goes, all cows are black. This is cognition naively reduced to vacuity. The formalism which recent philosophy denounces and despises only to see it reappear in its midst will not vanish from science, however much its inadequacy may be recognized and felt, till the cognizing of absolute actuality has become entirely clear as to its own nature. Since the presentation of a general idea in outline before any attempt to follow it out in detail makes the latter attempt easier to grasp, it may be useful at this point to give a rough idea of it at the same time, taking the opportunity to get rid of certain habits of thought which impede philosophical cognition. Okay, so with that last sentence, it sort of sounds like Hegel's actually finally getting around to the preface, having prefaced the preface with a pre-preface that sort of discredits the idea of the preface. Now he's finally getting to the point where he's like, okay, I do need to give some indication of what you're going to be in for the next 500 pages. But this, his sort of the target of his animosity here is again that what he referred to in the previous paragraph as a monochromatic formalism, or an adherence to the absolute idea, which I had tried to characterize as that very common trend of theories of everything, which we often see when experts in one specific scientific field begin to think that they are philosophers and use whatever theory they've cultivated in that field to explain absolutely everything. And that's something that I think Hegel is very much in opposition to. He thinks that process really involves a crass form of abstraction, where in order to explain any phenomenon in terms of that theory of everything, in terms of that monochromatic formalism or formula, you have to reduce every phenomenon to a very, very narrow set of characteristics that it has in common with the other phenomena that you're trying to explain. You reduce it to again, a monochromatic formalism, reduce it to a single element of likeness. The problem there, a problem that I think Donald Davidson highlights in his essays on metaphor, where he says at one point that the simile is different from the metaphor in that every simile is coherent. Similes always work because likenesses are totally trivial. Everything is like everything else. But it's just that the likeness is often not really all that meaningful. Identifying the likeness doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying anything new or insightful about the phenomena themselves. You know, any two phenomena are going to have some sort of a similitude that they share, and that therefore can't really be the basis for a scientific insight. And what he, I think, is about to tell us in the next few paragraphs is that one has to, in order to really identify or begin to understand a thing, you can't work on the basis of the resemblances. You have to leap from it into what it is radically unlike, into what it differs from. And it's that relationship with its negative that provides the basis for saying what the thing truly is. But he famously characterizes this other kind of crass form of abstraction here as the night in which, as the saying goes, all cows are black. So it's almost as though, in order to apply the theory of everything, what you have to do is sort of back up from the phenomenon, squint really hard, ignore all of the errant detail, all of the things that make, the phenomena unique, and reduce them to, again, some trivial feature that they have in common with all other phenomena. All cows are black when there's no light to be shown upon them. But that should never be mistaken for insight. Likeness really is not the basis for any kind of logical explanation, he wants to say here. There is something also, a theme that keeps coming up, I think, and which maybe I'll talk about this at length some other time, but in reflecting on it, this theme of risk, the idea that true philosophy, the really following an insight through an exhaustive self-mediation process by which the thing you're trying to understand unpacks itself in a temporal process before you, a process that your very cognition traces and repeats. That's a dangerous process to undertake. You don't really know where it's going to land you. When you have a theory of everything, when you start from a theory of everything, and then you go around to the phenomena to apply it to, there's no risk there. You already know what results you're going to get. And in fact, ultimately, I think this habit of thought goes hand in hand with a sort of modern guruism. The only real results that you're aiming at are book sales. There's always a kind of material profitability whenever there's a theory of everything on the table. You're always trying to sell something. Hegel's philosophy is a hard one to sell because you're setting an infinite task of cognitive labor upon the thinker, and there's no way to really tell where this process is going to take us. It might be that it reveals to us a universe that is deeply unflattering to our ego and does not offer us a lot of personal hope. And there's a passage that I keep kind of coming back to in this respect, a passage that I think sort of allegorizes that sense of risk. It comes from Moby Dick, one of my very favorite passages in this book, occurs about 3/4 of the way through. It's the passage in which the young black sailor, Pip, is thrown overboard. Pip is young, he's inexperienced, he's very nervous, and when he has a habit every time they harpoon a whale of panicking and leaping overboard. Usually they come around and rescue him, but there's one occasion where they don't. They harpoon the whale and the Stubbs whaling ship takes off, and within minutes Pip is just left there treading water in the middle of the ocean. And it really fucks him up in a way that I think is one of the most terrifying, yields one of the most terrifying paragraphs in all of American literature. But it so happened that those boats, without seeing Pip, suddenly spying whales close to them on one side turned and gave chase, and Stubbs' boat was now so far away, and he and all his crew so intent upon his fish, that Pip's ringed horizon began to expand around him miserably. By the merest chance, the ship itself at last rescued him. But from that hour, the little Negro went about the deck an idiot. Such, at least, they said he was. The sea had jeeringly kept his finite body up, but drowned the infinite of his soul. Not drowned entirely, though, rather carried down alive to wondrous depths, where strange shapes of the unwarped primal world glided to and fro before his passive eyes. And the miser merman, wisdom, revealed his hoarded heaps, and among the joyous, heartless, ever-juvenile eternities, Pip saw the multitudinous, God-omnipresent coral insects that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. He saw God's foot upon the treadle of the loom, and spoke it, and therefore his shipmates called him mad. So man's insanity is heaven's sense, and wandering from all mortal reason, man comes at last to that celestial thought which, to reason, is absurd and frantic, and, wail or woe, feels then, uncompromised, indifferent as his God. It's a chilling set of images, and I think part of what Hegel is pointing to here in discrediting these theories of everything, the idea is that they shelter us from the night through which reason must pass. They fill it with a safe, simple, readily intelligible image that can be used to explain everything. Whereas if we follow wisdom all the way down, what we may end up discovering is a universe that was never made with us in mind and does not have our well-being at heart in its design, and a universe in which we were not intended